learn to improve conversions and generate more leads with the video podcast at marketingoptimization.tv. Hi, and welcome to Marketing Optimization with Alex Designs. I'm your host, Alex Harris, and today we're chatting with Steve P. Young from the great podcast, MobileAppChat, and his new website, appmasters.co. How you doing, Steve?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here, Alex.
I'm happy to have you. We're talking all about today transforming your app business from a hobby to real income. Now, a lot of people come to me and they're creating an app and they really want to increase their conversions, their downloads, and start really generating that revenue. To get started, what would be your top tip for marketing your mobile app and improving those downloads?
Well, if you've already got an app out there, I would really turn to ASO, which is SEO for the App Store. But if you don't have an app out there and you only have an idea, I would say really do some market research in terms of talking to the target audience early. And so when I was building my next app called OSnap, I was talking to anybody. I posted an ad on Craigslist and I said, hey, I'm looking for people who take a lot of selfies. I've got a new camera app. And this was before I even had an app ready to go. And I got on a Google Hangout with somebody that was a potential customer. So she was like a teenage girl. Now it's weird because I'm a 30-year-old man and it's like talking to a teenage lady, but at the same time, like she was the target audience. And I was like, hey, like, do you take selfies? She said, yes. And I said, how do I have this camera app where you can touch anywhere on the screen and take a picture. It's like, oh, that's great because I actually use the rear-facing camera to take pictures because it's better, higher quality. And so I would say start your marketing as early as possible. Go talk to people. I talk to a bunch of people in the app space, and they're always a little bit afraid of showing off their app. They're like, it's not ready yet, it's not perfect. And at the same time, I don't think you're doing anything. You just need the general idea to start talking to people and really starting that marketing process early on. So that's the advice I would give.
Yeah, and you do a lot of consulting to help people, take their apps to the next level or build that runway to really get started. And downloads are really important, but what about revenue? What tips would you have to, maybe increase in-app purchases or selling your app from the beginning?
Yeah, so if I've a couple of different apps that I have are just paid, straight paid, right? And they still work. And so it depends on the category that you're in, but the apps that I have that are paid are in the children's category. And so they tend to do well. And I just did a recent ASO update on one of my apps. I've seen 300% increase. Now, that's one way of doing it. So if you've got a paid app, try to figure out ASO, and then Sensor Tower would be a great resource that I would recommend going checking out. But if you're familiar with SEO, I use a lot of SEO tactics to figure out what to do with ASO. And so, Sensor Tower is great in terms of figuring out if the traffic score and the difficulty of a keyword, but then also looking at Google AdWords to figure out what other related keywords that you may be able to target. And so that's what I did with one of my apps. It was called ABC DJ, and it was a phonics app. And I renamed it because in Google AdWords, I put phonics, and I noticed that phonics play was really searched on. And I put in Sensor Tower, and I noticed that the traffic score wasn't great, but the difficulty score was really low. And Sensor Tower goes on a range of 1 to 10. And so they were both like 2 traffic, 2 difficulty. And I said, perfect. So I renamed it to put phonics play / get kids hooked on alphabet sounds. So all these keywords that I found out through AdWords, I put it into, and I put get hooked because hooked on phonics was another one, right? And so you kind of get a little tricky and a little clever with the keywords in the app name. So that's one way. If you got a paid app, look at ASO. If you're doing in-app purchases, one killer tip that I got from a past guest of mine is looking at how much. Well, let me take a step back. There's a past guest of mine that was talking about freemium. And so, you got a free app and then you want people to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Now, freemium works when a potential customer would pay more than they would if they just gave you the $199, right? So, for example, my paid app is $199. If I went premium or freemium and the only purchase that they can make is $199, it's better just to charge $199 upfront. It's worth it if I can charge them $199 and then $199 again, and then $199 again for some other content, like Clash of Clans, right? You can spend $100 on that game just buying different various things. Mm-hmm. So that's one way. Like, don't just go freemium because it's a hot buzzword, but really look at if it makes sense for your app. And so if you want to increase in-app purchases, The one thing that a past guest has done is, and you can look at all these games as well that have done pretty well, and the mechanics. So making people, it's called live ops, I think, within in games, but making people speed up certain things, right? Like you delay the game, you can't play it, and you have to pay to sort of speed it up, but you can wait if you want.
Okay. Yep.
So that's one way. The other way is this one killer tip, if you're selling content, is bundling content. And so like package A gives you this content, package B gives you this content, package C gives you this content, and they're all like, let's say $199, but you can buy all of them for $399. And a past guest was like, our revenues, like it went from like $50 a day to $100 a day when we just implemented that one little trick. And they just got tired of, they just noticed that people were buying 2 to 3 packs in their game. And then when they made the buy all function, they were getting maybe like $3, $4. But then when they increased it to, I don't know what the exact figures were, but buy all packs for like $6, and everybody just bought the all packs. So that's another tip if you're selling content.
Now, you mentioned ASO, App Store Optimization, a couple times, and you talked about the title, and you can also optimize the description, I assume, just like you can a podcast to improve your rankings. And I also noticed that in the app, while you're using it, people ask for reviews. I'm sure all of those things kind of take into play to improve your placement inside the App Store. Can you give any other tips related to getting better placement in the store? Yeah,
so for the description part, now that depends on the App Store. In the iTunes, description doesn't really matter. So if you're in Google Play or Amazon, that's when it starts to matter a little bit more in terms of ASO rank, your search rank. And so for the description, for the iTunes store, which is the biggest one, it's really your app name and your keyword field that's going to really make the biggest difference. But there's a lot of different things with ASO. And so like you can optimize your app icon, right? A lot of, just look at what other people are doing and kind of figure out what works. And I've noticed that a lot of people, and I did this with my apps, is like you have a huge like sort of character, and then you have that face, and you have like them smiling or do something that seems to catch people. We're all like, you're in optimization. We're all we're all attracted to faces, and so if you can make a cartoon style face within your icon, that really helps. The other thing is screenshots, and so ASO works in terms of giving you more exposure, but you need to optimize your actual app page too within iTunes or Google Play. So screenshots, so start with the icon and then go to the screenshots and make sure the screenshot's more of like a billboard. A lot of people just put here's what the screen actually looks like instead of, putting some text, like putting some features, putting some awards. If you look at the Talking Tom, it says, I think it was like 400 million downloads is their first screenshot. Like that's attractive. I'm like, okay, well 400 million people can't be wrong. And so if you got some awards that you can put out there, put it out there, or whatever that unique feature set is, put it in that screenshot and tout it a little bit more. So icon, screenshot, and then keywords. And so keywords within the app name and then keywords within the keyword field really help out. And so the way I did it with my app was the more targeted keywords I wanted in the app name, like phonics play, like get hooked on phonics, like alphabet sounds. They didn't have that much traffic, but they were very targeted. And I know that these people would probably convert if they look for it. And the other keyword within the keyword field, I was obviously going for like phonetics and more general keywords, but I would say get targeted within kind of like SEO, like whatever your target keyword is, and whether it's like the long tail ones, put it in your app name, because that's going to, especially for a paid app, that's going to generate more revenue for you.
Also, when I'm about to download an app, I see that people, as you said, they create some type of social proof, whether you're featured in TechCrunch or Mashable or New York Times or whatever. If you are, show that in your screenshots or in your description. That could bring some relevancy to the people at that time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you know what? You mentioned something, Alex, too, was I forgot what you said, but man, what was it?
Social proof or?
Yeah, social proof. Oh, reviews. That's what you got into. And so I put together this blog post about how do you get clever with your reviews. And one tip is, if you launch an app, and they're like, Yelp does this all the time, right? You launch it and you're like, hey, do you like Yelp? Would you please rate it? And I'm like, look, man, I'm trying to find a restaurant or something, and you're asking me to rate an app. And so timing's critical too. And so one of the best apps that do this really well, it's FIFA. It's an older app, but it's FIFA 2013 or 2012. But after you win a big challenge, like a big tournament, they ask you, hey, congrats, Alex. do you mind rating this app if you really like it? And so that does really well when you time the prompts, the review prompts within the actual general flow of the user, right? Like if you think about marketing on a website, we don't just say after a user visits 5 times, pop them up like, hey, would you leave a review for my website? We don't do that, right? Like we look for customers that are happy and then we ask them. We really filter through that. But in the app space, we don't do that for some reason. And it's better to really focus more on use some of our web techniques and put it into the app space and say, okay, who's a really good customer when they've done this X, Y, and Z, then let's ask them for a prompt. Not just how many times they've opened it. I think a lot of times it's like after they open it 5 times, let's ask them for a prompt.
Excellent advice. Now, we've spoken about improving your conversions, your downloads, getting people to use it, making more money, and getting better presence in the App Store. Now let's talk about the experience of the app, where I think a lot of people are missing when they first create an app. They just don't think about that necessarily, that onboarding process. What I've heard a lot of people talk about these days is activations, getting people to onboard through a great process, whether it's a tour or an experience they're flipping through, but they miss collecting leads and they don't have a way to really remarket to the potential audience that they really have advantage of. What would you be telling someone who is first creating an app and you review and they have maybe a not so good onboarding process?
I would say just like we do in the web space. I mean, there's so much knowledge that we have. And so for your audience, they probably are familiar with some type of onboarding optimization, right? And a lot of times what we try to do is get everybody to take the actions that we want and then ask for like the email or whatever the lead that we're going after. And so a lot of mistakes that I see are people asking for the registration too quick, right? Like it's just too fast. And so especially in the app space, because unlike the web, we got this huge screen. We can do this very quickly. We could probably type really quickly and get things done. And we could probably connect to Facebook really easily. But in the app space, we want things done really fast. And so if your app promotes, let's say, leaving a review for like a Yelp app, leaving a review for a restaurant, but then before I'm able to even leave a review, you ask me to log in, that's a barrier for me to say, oh, well, like I might not want to do this. But you can just say, okay, leave a review and then ask for it right afterwards and then say, okay, you wrote your review. Now would you like to share this with the rest of the world? We need you for you to sign up. Now you gave me a good reason for me to sign up, and that's a great way to do it. And so, they make it really easy now in the app space to connect with Facebook and do Twitter because now, the app, the iPhone's completely integrated. And so your Facebook data is already in there and everything else. So that stuff is really easy. Just find the right spot that makes sense. I think the Hotel Tonight does this really well. They're like, it takes you 3 different clicks. And if you look at Uber, they're like, it takes you 4 different clicks to get to a hotel and book it and you're done. And if you look at like Priceline or some of these other ones, you're like, it takes you 5 or 6 different, it's like really like 15 clicks to get to where you want to go. And so try to optimize it for the least amount of clicks, then ask for the info when you really, really, really need it rather than, asking for right away. Because a lot of these apps like log in, I'm like, I haven't even used the app yet. Like, let me use it a little bit and then let me log in. And so if you're working on a game, like they do this really well where they give you virtual currency for logging into Facebook. And, like my son's always playing all these games and it's like, can you log into Facebook and you get 5 gems? Like, all right. And so on Facebook, it looks like I'm playing a ton of games.
Yeah, totally. So a lot of people come to me and they've created maybe 1 or 2 apps and they really think that, that's going to be kind of the win all for them. What would you say to someone who's, an entrepreneur who's just getting started, who maybe they think they're going to retire off those 1 or 2 apps?
Well, I would say, you're living a dream here in a way because I've been in this space since 2011, and my first app did really well in terms of downloads. It doesn't monetize at all, but yeah, it does really well. And so I would say diversify. The way I see business in general is all about diversification. If we talk about investment in stocks, we think, hey, you got to diversify, right? And so the app space for me, I love it, and that's why I started the podcast for it, because I wanted to turn my hobby into a real business. and I wanted to interview people. And so it's done wonders for my app business, but it's also done wonders for just me as an overall brand and me overall business. And so I would say diversify, right? Like if you're only focused on one or two apps and you want to make it big with these one or two apps, I've interviewed over 100 app developers, and rarely do I talk to an indie game studio that has just one or two games. It took them maybe 5 or 6 tries to get it right and then be like, oh, this works. Let me do this. It's rarely the first time they ever built the app that it just took off. Like rarely. You hear this, and media makes a big deal of it, but it's a rare thing. So I would say diversify. Like keep building, but keep building small and keep learning on top of each app. And if you've got one or two, you haven't seen that much success in it, figure out if that's the right market for you. And I started with kids apps, and now I want to start moving away from it because my kids are a little bit older now. And when I first started, they were young. I'm like, hey, this is one user that I have. You're going to play with it. But now I'm moving on to something else, right? Like because I want to do something different. And so you build on top of that knowledge, but don't wait for that one or two. Unless you have investment, then it's a different story, right? And you can go big and you can go try to hit that home run. But if you're just relying on one or two apps to really become an indie developer, like a successful indie developer, that's a rare thing.
Great advice. Really diversify. Just with any investment, you want to diversify, figure out a lot of opportunity, get feedback, as you said, and really figure out how to pivot and push your apps further. So what would you say to app creators in general to really take their apps to the next level? What would be some concrete advice that you'd be giving in your consulting?
All right. So I've got two different directions I can take this. So the first thing that may be a little more controversial is the way I feel about the app business is I don't want to rely completely on the app stores to make my money. Right. So the way I monetize my business right now, I have sponsorships for the podcast. I make money off of my apps. I do some consulting. And so it's diversified. And so I would say if you're an app creator out there and you want to be independent, let's say you want to live a lifestyle, you want to be a lifestyle entrepreneur where you get to work wherever you want, whenever you want, I would say diversify. Figure out if there are other ways, other streams of income that you can bring in to the app space that's just not completely reliant on apps. So a little bit more controversial, but if you want to go that route, but that would be one thing. Now, if you're an app creator, you're like, I just love apps. I don't want to do anything else. I just love apps. I would say focus on ASO, like really get good with it because that's going to help out. And then figure out your launch strategy. Like a lot of times we just plan, we're like, oh, we'll put it in the app store and then, okay, it's great. No, like this next app, I'm like taking my time because I've been mentioning it for like 3 or 4 months and people are asking like, where's this app, Steve? I'm like, I really want to get all the marketing channels in place before I launch this app. And whenever we do a product launch, if you want to use that analogy, we really take our time. Like, who can we get in terms of affiliates? Who can we talk to in terms of this? And how do we make this the biggest splash when we do a product launch? I would figure out the same way when you're launching your next app is let's talk early. Is this something that people want? I mean, you do a product launch, like, is this something you want? You try to pre-sell it. Do all these things. Put everything into place before you launch this app. Get people really excited about it. And people aren't excited about it from the very beginning, maybe you don't have a great idea that you need to build. And even if you want to, I would say go for it still if it's your first app because you need to learn. But, maybe don't be afraid to throw away an idea as well.
I think some great advice because people do work in silos. As a lifestyle entrepreneur, we're lonely and we come up with this great idea and we don't share it with anybody. We think people are going to steal it or whatever. And that's pretty much the worst thing you can do. Pretty much the secret, and I think you'll agree, to a successful product launch, as you said, is the feedback. The ability to get the feedback and iterate as quickly as you can so you can pivot to not make a lot of mistakes and go a lot further faster in the short term.
Yeah, Alex, I'll give you a couple of different resources because we always say, launch early, launch lean, everything else. There's an app out there called POP, P-O-P, and if you search for it, go search for prototyping on paper. And what it allows you to do is take pictures of sketches of an app and then turn it into a real app. And you can show people, hey, here's what my app does, and they could click around with just paper sketches that you put together. Now you can go high fidelity and put some real nice designs onto it within this app. But if you really just want to do pen and paper, you can do that. So that's one way to easily go out there and start talking to people. Yes, it's not the best thing in the world, but at least you get the idea, and people will say, oh, wow, that does, maybe you should put this button here or this here, and you start figuring out what you can build. So Pop is one great app that I recommend everybody checking out too.
I love it. I'm definitely going to check that out because I'm always trying to figure out how to design the apps for my clients.
Yeah.
And I have this little dry erase iPhone template that I play around with, but it'd be nice to show it on the phone as well. So let's talk about your podcast and your membership site, appmasters.co. Let's tell people more about it and how they can find out about you.
Sure. The podcast, I would say the podcast has been the best thing I've ever done in my life. And so if anybody's out there listening, emulate Alex, right? You listen to him every single day. Whatever you like about him, emulate him. That's what I did with my podcast, right? Like I love Mixergy, and I emulated the interview style of Andrew Warner. And I kind of just said, oh, like he really gets guests to open up about some of the things they're going through. So emulate it and start your own podcast because it's the best thing I've ever done. And the one tip I would recommend is just email your first guest. You don't need to know anything squat about podcasting. Just email your first guest, see if they want to come on, and then schedule it for 2 weeks later. And then once they say yes, you figure it out. You got 2 weeks to figure it out. So go do that. But my podcast, I started because I wanted to grow my app business that's why I say from hobby to real income, because and I wanted to talk to people. And so that I interview app developers. If you want to figure out how to really grow your business, your app business, it's a free resource. It's mobileappchat.com. Now, if you want to go to the next level, the next site that I just started, appmasters.co, is sort of like Mixergy Premium, sort of like Treehouse, but just for the app space. So I ask past guests to come back on with me, and I do a step-by-step course on a particular topic, and we give you step-by-step tactical knowledge that you can use and go back after it. Like my goal for that site is after you watch a course to be able to implement it right away. And so that's what I do with appmasters.co. There's a lot of great sites on how to build a pre-launch community. There's a course, how to podcast with me, how to do an app video, ASO with Sensor Tower. So the folks from Sensor Tower came on and told us how to really use that tool to optimize for ASO. So all these courses are on there on appmasters.co.
Awesome, Steve. I love it. And the site's looking really good too.
Thanks.
I see that a lot of partners have came on and they're doing courses with you, and that's a great model for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Alex Lee, but I've been able to leverage the podcast. So the podcast brought sponsors on, and then I started a mastermind for the app folks through the podcast, and then I'm starting this at masters.co. And it all started with just the podcast, right? Like things happen, and a lot of my consulting clients are past guests. And so I think it was like maybe I've had, let's just say 5 consulting clients, and 4 of the 5 have been because they heard me on the podcast or they were past guests. And so the podcast has been the most valuable thing I've done. But I was able to leverage the podcast into so many different things now, where I had a full-time job when I first started. Now I'm completely on my own and loving life, because, I mean, the first quarter of being on your own, you're like heads down, like I really want to grow this business. And now the second quarter has come in and I'm like, you know what, I'm just loving life. Like if I make enough to just, sort of provide for my family, that's great. Because, yesterday my wife and I had brunch and we had some wine. It's like, you don't get to do that if you're working for the man.
Yeah, absolutely. Those Mondays come around, and you got a place to be. We kind of figure out how when and where we want to work when you do create your own life. And this has only happened in really the last year for you.
Yeah. So the podcast I started last May, and I left my full-time job in January. And so people who make excuses about I can't launch a podcast while I'm a full-time job. Man, I was hustling, my friend. I was waking up at 6 a.m. I'm on the West Coast, and I was waking up at 6 a.m. just to record with your East Coast folks. I was like, if there was a guest, I was on the East Coast. I loved it because I knew I could wake up early, not miss a beat with my full-time job, and record these different podcasts. And so I did that, and there's some nights where I stayed up till 10, till 12 to record these podcasts too. And so, I mean, I hustled for a year, but then it's starting to pay off a little bit now that, I'm out on my own, and I'm able to support myself on my own, which is cool feeling.
Awesome, man. Well, congratulations with all the success. I think you're just getting started, and I'm looking forward to seeing you grow.
Alex, I do want to say one thing. The step-by-step, if somebody's out there and they they're on their own, or they're just starting out their business, but they're not seeing the revenues, the things that I did was I started a podcast, but I also joined a mastermind. And I know you have a mastermind of your own. And I would highly recommend anybody joining a mastermind because it's been the most valuable. I met you through another mastermind. I met so many great people. And I don't think I would be where I'm at today if I didn't join that mastermind because, like I met a business coach, Katie McCarthy, through this mastermind. And it wasn't until I was talking to her about like where I wanted to be that she really got me in order. It's like, Steve, how are you going to make this income when you leave? Because I picked the date when I was going to leave. And she's like, how are you going to leave? And I'm like, I have no idea. And it wasn't until I had that conversation with her that I started getting things in order, saying like, here's where the income's coming from. I need a consulting client. I need to monetize the podcast. Maybe this mastermind makes sense because it's been so valuable for me and it's a good revenue source for me. And so I started putting these things in order, and I don't think I would be where I'm at today if it wasn't for the mastermind. And so I would highly recommend to the listener out there, go checking out Alex's mastermind because you're going to get a ton of value out of it. And people are so afraid. Like, Alex, when I first started the mastermind, people were like, why are you charging for this? Why? What is this BS, right? Like, you won't value it unless you pay for it. And
Yep.
We paid for ours, and it's like, it was the best thing I've ever done. And so there were these things that happened in progression that allowed me to leave my full-time job and grow my business. And the mastermind was a big part of that, the whole process. So go join Alex's mastermind. It's going to be the best thing that you've ever done.
It's all about that accelerated growth. As soon as you're around like-minded people and you publicly display of what you want to do, you get in the mindset of putting yourself out there and accomplishing those goals. Because a lot of this stuff does come down to how you process it in your brain and get it into the real world.
Yep. And we're all solopreneurs, so it's great to talk to people and just get people's feedback. And so, yeah, that's what I would say, Alex.
Well, thanks a lot, Steve. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching the Marketing Optimization Podcast with Alex Designs. Please remember to subscribe to all of the videos in my YouTube channel. Thank you.